you're really looking at a generational talent here. Hi everybody, I'm Paris.
Hi, I'm Selena.
And we are Love Uncut. This week we wanted to react to the Inauguration poem by Amanda Gorman. A poem that is said to have stole the show. Now we're big fans of poetry, where I can actually spend my mornings listening to poetry, amateur poets, on that Clubhouse app where people share. And you're quite a budding poet here and there as well, aren't you, Selena?
Yeah, I like writing poems, but I guess mine are either like very trivial, like about a crab, or I don't know, usually from a place of sadness. So I guess like something like this is quite deep, isn't it? Because she's basically writing about, from what I understand, I haven't listened to it yet, just the state of America and moving forward, and I guess how to progress and unify. So yeah, I mean, the perfect platform for it is Inauguration Day, right? If you're gonna put that message across, this is the perfect time for it. And I think not just for America, kind of across the world, everyone maybe needs that message. So yeah. Yeah,
that message of hope. And you know, artists and comedians and poets, musicians, you know, they're always kind of looked to kind of capture moments. And you know, you look back in years to come at some of these artists and comedians and their work, and just what they've done, how they've drawn a line under things. I also wanted to look at George the Poet as well, who's a well-known poet in the UK space.
But he's also a musician as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. You were a fan of his before, you know, before I met you, as I understand it. So he has Ugandan heritage, as I understand it, and there has been some unrest within their democratic process over there. So it's not too dissimilar in some ways. The US are having issues with the democratic process. Uganda are having issues with their democratic process. So yeah, we're going to look at both of these poems and just give a reaction to them. So you guys ready? Good, sounds like you're ready. Let's do it.
Oh, and I think it's interesting to say this lady reading the poem is only 22. So imagine, like, at 22 reading your poem to basically the whole world. That's amazing. So congrats to her for that.
Yeah, hats off to you.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow.
Especially the ending, right? Being brave enough to be the light, to see the light. Yeah, very poignant ending.
Yeah, I mean, I was drawn into her projection and confidence as soon as she stepped up on that mic. You know, there wasn't a waver in sight in terms of her voice. And, you know, she managed to bring the words to life as well. And the message was clear. It's what we expected, isn't it? Kind of a summary of, hey, they actually tried to delay, you know, this process and the voice of the people. And they didn't succeed. And, you know, America has great potential. So yeah, an amazing, touching poem, and it's capturing the mood. Everybody wants to feel, you know, hope for the future.
Yeah, I think that's important. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
I think that's important because it was balanced in that it acknowledged sort of the past and everything that had happened, but it was done in a way that the focus is on hope and coming together. And she used a lot of, you know, very kind of significant alliteration, so like almost like juxtaposing words of hurt and heal and grief and grow, and I think there was blunder and burden.
One wounded world.
Yeah, I mean, she, you can tell there was a lot of work that went into that poem, not just from an emotional kind of point of view, but also just from a syntax and flow and sort of really focusing on key words, drawing a highlight to them point of view. So just structurally, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. It, you know, the significance of it and the structure, she really hit both nails on the head, I'd say.
Yeah, and you know, during lockdown, it was interesting, especially lockdown 1, everybody kind of reverted to listening to the soul music and going to the classic music and the classic artists of a classic time. So it really does underline the value of artists, you know, in our society, and I'm glad that they picked a woman of colour to deliver that speech, because, you know, in America there's no one that's more, you know, disrespected than a woman of colour, you know, so to elevate her onto that platform and for her to speak about, you know, her ambitions of being a president as well, it hammered home, you know, there's a lot of people watching that will be made to think, and lots of kids, so yeah.
Well, I think there's a wider message there in that, you know, I mentioned she's only 22, and really that's kind of the upcoming generation, isn't it? Those guys, in terms of, I guess, this generation passing on to them and the impact they're going to make, and the world in its state that they're being left to grow up with. I mean, I know we're growing up in it as well, but it's kind of the younger generation now, isn't it? So
I'm part of them. What about you? But I think,
oh,
you know,
I think we all are. But you know, like the significance of someone being 22 and doing that. And kind of even someone at that age is saying, hey, look at where we are, let's focus on where we can be. I think she even said, let's not focus on what divides, but put our differences aside. Like, surely as, I don't know, if you're 40, 50 and a 22-year-old is saying that, it should make you kind of buck up and be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I agree, and I think that we all have the capacity to change, but obviously it's not the, you know, young, sprightly 22-year-olds who are in Congress and that. So yeah, hopefully,
they were all listening, so
yeah.
Fingers crossed.
So that's A Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. So let's go into George the Poet's poem then, Black, Yellow and Red, which I believe are the colours of the Ugandan flag. I mean, so yeah, what do you know about this election? I mean, I know that there's been like some unrest, and I think one of the party leaders was trapped in his house for days and days.
Basically, the guy in power, I think his name is, let me make sure I'm pronouncing this right, Museveni. Apologies if I haven't said that right. He's been in power for a long time, and there was I believe he's a Ugandan entertainer called Bobby Wine, and he was one of the, I guess, opposition parties trying to go against this guy and take him out of power because he's basically a despot. And yeah, he's basically been in power for ages and ages, and it's just a bit dodgy. But I believe his family were attacked. I believe he was attacked. He's been targeted. So it's clearly, it's dodgy, right? And it's dodgy in the case of violence, just because someone wants to hold on to power, and it's just sad, you know. In both cases, I suppose there's the linkage of democracy is not being upheld, and in the States, okay, there are protests and whatever, but here, like, people are actually violently being attacked. And well, actually, to be fair, in the States, people were violently attacked as well.
So to say,
you know, America claims to be this great leader and to uphold democracy, but you're just as bad as the countries that you're always making fun of and saying, you know, they don't abide by democracy. So really, I don't know, I guess it just shows human nature, and that people who want power don't want to let go.
It's about the veneer of, I guess, equality, meritocracy, and but there's a hill to climb, just like Amanda Gorman said. Okay, so once again, that was The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. Amazing, heartfelt poem. And here we have George the Poet's poem called Black, Yellow and Red. Black and yellow and red. Maybe it's not the time. Right, so let's check this out then, people.
We didn't even know it was gonna happen. No security checks or nothing. You remember that madness with the drone? Now you're a big man, yeah? About to be 30.
Hey.
We'll engage in that.
Come on.
Send my love to Sandra for real.
Respect, bro. Yeah,
What
love.
you saying? You doing anything? You just chilling?
Bro, I'm just sitting here trying to write these poems, and my mind keeps going off in random directions. Imagine, I'm about to turn 30 on the same day as the Ugandan elections. I became George the Poet at the age of 20, not long after my Cambridge entry. Filled the position because the space was empty. Now I'm looking back on a decade of amazing memories. And bro, so much has changed.
What's the biggest change for you?
When I started uni, like I always say, I planned to become an MP. All I dreamt about was change. I wanted plenty. So I'm studying political science, and I've realized we're facing a difficult bias. The things they're making me read contain the information we need to break the mold and take control, but the youth have a different dream they've been sold. They've been told about the status and the papers they can make on road. And that makes sense to a young mind, especially one that hasn't done time. So despite the dangers road may involve, it's a calculated risk. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying the thought process, but that's about the basic gist. So all of this stuff that I'm reading in Cambridge has basically no chance of reaching the same kids that I hope to serve by becoming an MP. So my campaign would be running on empty.
Yeah, I hear you, bro. I hear
Get me? I think the main thing I've realized is politics won't save us. As young black people, we have better ways of communicating.
How do you mean?
Think about it. If I can take an idea I learned at uni and rap it to these kids, they can learn it through me. Especially if they see man graduated and made money without turning bougie. Think about all the poor black kids across the world. That's what they want to see. Someone who can show them how to become a somebody.
Facts.
And we do that through music. Bro, making music's like dreaming aloud. You influence people's feelings when you're dealing with sound. When we can make it seem deep and profound, we can lift people's spirits and earn a decent amount, and we make our people them proud by releasing an album, speaking to thousands when we perform on stage. And yeah, it is a way of dealing with all the rage, because representation obviously is a form of change.
So what are you saying about Bobby Wine?
Bobby Wine.
Once upon a time, Bobby Wine was just like another boy in the city of Kampala,
East Member of Parliament Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobby Wine, did what
We'll speak to Ugandan Afro-pop star and newly elected MP, Bobby Wine, who almost needs no introduction for many of you. Today, freed on bail and facing a charge.
When we talk about the hood, we're talking deprivation, but we need to learn to describe it properly. In London, there's all sorts of desperation, but Ugandan poverty is a different kind of poverty. It's the kind where you might not live inside a property, the kind where you live by the midnight economy. People don't make it out of this life that commonly. So Bobby Wine was a slight anomaly. He used his voice and made music with it. Back when people thought there was no future in it, he represented the poor through his lyrics, and the youth gravitated to his spirit. Bearing in mind, I couldn't speak Luganda, so more time I'm singing along to the odd English phrase. But one thing I remember clear as day is how my cousins and their friends used to sing his praise.
I am this bad man from Kamocha. Everything what me do is all Kamocha. And I'm straight up made in Kamocha. So who no better know you from Kamocha.
Yo, can you see me?
Yeah, I got you, bro. Got you.
Oh, yeah, and I see you now.
Yeah. You're saying Bobby Wine, yeah?
What was I saying? Yeah. Bobby Wine went on to become an MP. These times, I'm an MC. You see the role reversal. That was going to be my journey, at least by 30. But life is live. No rehearsal. It's a performance that you can never know the words for. As an MP, he stood beside the stuff in his lyrics. Bobby Wine was an outspoken government critic, but his actual plan for Uganda wasn't specific. Like, he spent a lot of time criticizing the president, calling him out for undermining development, and even though a lot of what he said was true, and that's what an opposition politician's meant to do, it's one thing being loud and right. It's another thing working on policy out of sight. Don't get me wrong, he's been brave, he's been strong. But there's more to governing than getting crowds excited. It's one thing being known as a visionary. It's another thing trying to keep control of the military. Put it like that.
You know what? I hear that, but what are the people saying?
Because Ugandans, they love the country, but they're sick of the problems. And the system keeps giving them ridiculous options. For people who feel like they have no choice, Bobby Wine has been the perfect homegrown voice. But the president has made himself the center of everything. Most Ugandans can't see a contender just entering. Museveni's a constant. You know what you get with him. No one knows what to expect from the prospect of Bobby stepping in.
True. No one wants to upset the team.
This is it.
But from the perspective of African leaders, imagine how scary having to leave is. I mean, look at the past 10 years alone.
Yeah.
I bet the president's fears are grown, man.
Hey, for real.
Mugabe in Zimbabwe, Bashir in Sudan. Imagine how that must have put fear in a man.
Blood. Kabila in DRC. We all watch the same news. It's not like we can't see.
Bro, it's the same story over and over. Happened in Algeria.
Happened in Angola.
All these leaders just getting older and older, and the people get angrier.
Blood, it happened in Gambia. But you know what? We gotta be careful though. The situation's looking too familiar. I wrote about this on my podcast a couple years ago, back when Uganda was reminding me of Libya. I remember at the time I was saying, there's a faction of Ugandan society whose reaction is angry and violent, who can't stand being silent, but then there's another perspective. See, what does it take to govern effectively? One school of thought would say the rule of law, but not all Ugandans feel like that, given what the country's gone through before. Tribal persecution and gruesome war. Museveni came to power in the 80s, and as of 2018, 80% of Ugandans were under 35. Yeah, you heard me right, 35. They've never experienced another leader, and whoever that could be can't actually prove they've got the requisite experience to govern either. In fact, the other day Museveni gave a speech, and the way he addressed the country was particularly candid. Bazukulu, literally, grandkids. Bear in mind, Bobby Wine's 36. He hasn't really had to win popularity with a propaganda machine or using dirty tricks. He's self-made and he's well paid. To many ghetto kids, that's a heavenly mix. These times, come the next election, Museveni's 76. But there is something granddad-like about him. That's why so many can't imagine life without him. He represents the familiar, hence the parallels with tensions in Libya. First of all, the leadership of both Gaddafi and Museveni benefited their countries heavily. People often talk about both individuals' ability to move with political agility. Them man, they brought stability, and they brought the notion of government plausibility. But their countries were divided. More than they could take, a lot of young people decided. People were tired of poverty when politicians were commonly buying expensive shit. People were tired of censorship. These times, Kampala's seen a steep rise in street crimes, and in Benghazi, race riots eventually hit. And even then, Libya's unemployment rate was way better. Uganda's GDP per capita 7 years later is way deader. What I'm saying is it's not like people ain't fed up. If only corruption meant you could bribe someone so that change sped up. And corruption is another one. In fact, it's probably problem number one. Guys don't mind paying bribes and kickbacks if the give back is proportionate. But if they're paying into a system that doesn't benefit them, it's unrewarding, it's extortionate. And with high rates of adult literacy and more exposure because of globalization, people start noticing what they don't have in an underdeveloped and overpriced nation. That's how you get a brain drain. You can't maintain growth when talent finds it hard to prevail. People get frustrated and end up taking their skill sets to a different part of the world. Now Libya experienced something similar. Guys would rather graft in a land that's unfamiliar than stay there, in a state that doesn't play fair. So you got people feeling cheated by the system, non-violent resistors being given time in prison, tensions over tribalism, talent walking out. I've forgotten which country I'm talking about.
So what are you saying, there's no hope?
Maybe not with politics, but music? Even Museveni knows the power of music.
Yeah?
Yeah, come on. Music's a great way of making us think. Look, it's given us so many ways of making a drink. We got the juice, innit?
Come on.
And we won't stop producing it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you, cuz? All over the world.
I say this all the time, cuz we got the
Brother,
juice.
all over the world it's the most common beverage.
It's real talk.
And that's given us a lot of leverage, a lot of privilege, a lot of heritage. But all of this comes from the streets. Yet we still can't save our daughters and sons from the streets. We got famous artists walking with guns on the streets, and food still runs the alternate funds on the streets. We want our music to be our savior from all of this self-destructive behavior. But it's just a soundtrack to what's really happening. All the issues that we're not really tackling.
Flipping out, George.
Deeper than rap.
That took you right. That took you down into the rabbit hole for real, for real. That felt like a film, even though it's 12 minutes long.
Because it's like a short film, isn't it?
It was, yeah, but the whole thing, I mean, wow, just almost speechless there. Just, yeah, what an amazing talent he has. But we already knew that though. But he, that was taken from episodes, 6 and 7 from Have You Heard George's podcast. Now that's a multiple award-winning podcast, so definitely check it out. In terms of the education that gave me, I mean, I know what's going on in Uganda now. I feel like there's a threat going on. Now, he did not mention, to be fair, the violence that's kind of trickled out in terms of on Twitter and people being attacked and, you know, these kind of things. But he's kind of given a massive context to the situation. And I like the way that, you know, he framed things in terms of saying that being a politician isn't just hyping up the crowd. Which is basically
you have to have a plan, you have to have a strategy, and it's interesting though, because he said he kept saying politics isn't the answer, you know, and looking for other ways that can help, you know, such as music, etc. And that's what really will enter the psyche of people, and how people should use music for good, essentially, to uplift people, to encourage, especially, you know, I guess factions of society that don't feel they have that encouragement or representation. So I think that's important, and you know, especially nowadays, I'm going to sound like a grandma, but there's a lot of music that's just absolute shite out there, that's just about crap, and maybe artists need to be a bit more aware of what they're putting out. Like, I'm not saying don't have your fun club tune or whatever, but at least use your platform for good. It's not just all about happy time, feel good, or all about, I don't know, women and sex and drugs or whatever. Like, you can actually do something meaningful with your platform, especially like during lockdown, when that's literally one of the only outlets people have, you know, listening to music as an escape and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
definitely agree with that. And
yeah, I was going to add on as well. I mean, that's what I said. I said when lockdown happened and everybody didn't know what was happening, people reverted back to timeless music, which was music that had a message. Well, okay, so on the internet, that's what I was seeing on my Instagram feed, which is a microcosm. But people wanted music that had a message and was timeless, not like the quick club music. The labels that are happy to, you know, sign these artists. If you want to get signed, you better make sure you've got a trending sound, and they don't want to hear political messages. You know, they don't.
But some of the artists aren't under labels; they're independent. And
which
they
artists?
Still...
The ones with the widest reach perpetuate that very same shallow message. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, so, and again, even if you're independent, you know, you are probably going to have to go with the trending most of the time if you want to cultivate a career. Except for, you know, you've got people like Akala these days who, you know, he tours and his tour is selling out more and more every year. So, you know, I don't know if, for example, do you think that BBC would fund a short film like that on that topic? I don't necessarily think so.
I don't know, because BBC is trying to do a lot about raising awareness of certain issues, so they might. I don't know. You know, they've in a lot of their programs they have tried to be as inclusive and diverse as they can, despite getting complaints. So maybe a politicized message is a bit different. I don't know, but at least it's a step towards a more inclusive society. But yeah, in terms of Uganda, it's obviously sad, but it was interesting to hear that perspective of if someone's been in power so long, it's almost like, is the change even scarier? You know, will people actually vote for a change if that's what they're used to, even if what they're used to is not a good situation? So that was interesting. And even if maybe they do vote against it, does it matter anyway? Because this guy has all means to, you know, buy people off to vote for him or manipulate the votes, kind of similar to Russia really, but we won't go into that. And then you said, you know, he looks like a little granddad, and it's a bit, that juxtaposition is crazy, that someone is like your granddad, but then they're doing all this stuff behind the scenes to retain power and almost control. You know, that's not what a grandfather does. He takes care of his grandkids, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you know. And it's interesting because that's why people wanted Joe Biden, because he's like this dependable granddad type of person who's a throwback to, you know, America of the 60s. So
old school kind of values.
Yeah.
But then he spins that on his head, doesn't he? He's a lot more inclusive in terms of old school values.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's one of his, you know, big appeals. And then you've kind of got Kanye West, who at some point wanted to be president. I think it was mainly to take away votes from Joe Biden. And obviously Bobby Wine has done what Kanye couldn't do in terms of making it to the final standoff.
Actually being a proper candidate.
Yeah, musician into political candidate. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, excellently summarised by George the Poet. Definitely check out his podcast. I actually have to say as well, I like how kind of global his viewpoint was. You know, he touched on like London, Uganda, Libya, managed to put it all into 12 minutes and teach us a lot. So you're really looking at a generational talent here in George the Poet, and I think that this manner of communicating political messages and providing awareness, I think more people are going to try and do that. And I think that, you know, to my point about would BBC fund this, I think that more people are just putting their stuff on YouTube. They're not waiting for the wider mainstream. And I think over time, that independent audience will grow and flourish. And therefore, people will be able to put out more nuanced, pertinent issues.
Oh, and just stand up for what's right. I think that's the message at the end of the day. Like, the government isn't always going to get things right, or at least that particular person in power. So it's what can you do as an individual, even if it's just writing your own little poem for yourself to encourage yourself, or sharing it with the world, you know, or just taking inspiration from that to be a better person, a kind of person. You know, I'm going on my fairy tale unicorn thing again, but if everyone is just a bit kinder and a bit nicer and a bit more thoughtful of others, then the world can only be a better place. So yeah.
And I would say, you know, it's all about collective power. You know, the power, these people are leaders, but it's really the people that have the power. And, you know, the power is a collective power. It's everybody coming together for a vision, for a better vision, and mobilizing, not just kind of being apathetic. And there's lots of things designed to make you apathetic anyway, the world over. But trust me, the moment you wake up and then you really, you know, move towards collective good, you are unstoppable.
Just be intentional about it. Did you have a favourite out of the two poems?
George's one definitely, but I'm biased because I'm from London. I just like the way that he sewed together different places and gave the perspective, whereas the American one by Amanda was obviously a lot more American centric, which makes sense, to be honest. It should have been, although she did say the world over.
I think from a message point of view, I enjoyed both of them.
Yeah,
from a structural point of view, I enjoyed hers, because I feel like there was a lot of, you know, as I said, playing on alliteration and how certain words were highlighted, etc. And maybe that's because by nature it's more of a standardized poem, whereas his was a lot more fast and loose, and it was almost like, I don't know, spoken word at times. It was like a rap, it was like a conversation, it was a lot more interesting creatively. But I guess for me to digest, I preferred hers. The flow was a bit easier to follow for me, but that's, you know, personal preference. But the meaning of both is extremely important, and, you know, as you said, different ways of communicating will appeal to different people, and that's the beauty of both of them. Get the message home.
Yeah, I mean, look, both poems will stand the test of time. I definitely will be checking back for both of those poems. It's not really, you know, do you have a favourite? I mean, look, I have to let them both marinate.
Oh, if you're doing a reaction video, come on, you have to
Initially, that's where I'm at, for sure. That's where I'm at, but I'm allowed to let things develop and grow over time. Of course. So I hope you enjoyed both of the poems / spoken word movies, and you enjoyed both of them. And, you know, we mean everything that we say about how groundbreaking and, you know, timeless I think those poems will go on to be. I said it, you heard it here first.
Something before we end that I thought was really cool was Amanda apparently struggled to say the word R, and she the way she overcame that was kind of reciting a rap from the musical Hamilton, and just going over it and over it and over it before, like, until she could actually say the word R properly. So I found it. Imagine, like, you're giving this speech to everyone, and in the past you've had a very minor but still something you'd be conscious of type of speech is impediment, the word.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
I mean,
a quirk
that maybe, you know, you want to overcome. If she was happy with it, all good, but she wanted to overcome it. So I thought that was, like, in itself quite
formidable, yes.
Yeah, because it'd be something that even if you've overcome it, you'd be worried that, oh, is it just going to happen in the middle of, do you know what I mean?
She performed faultlessly.
She did amazing for that, but I thought that was quite cool.
I could not tell anything about her R's or whatever, so yeah, as I say, a faultless performance from a performance perspective. There was no hint of nerves in her voice, but yeah, no, that's a good way to round things off, you know, as I say, because it just shows when it comes to delivering a message in your big moment, you know, you really have to put the work in and prepare. It's not all just talent and then suddenly, hello world, here I am. And the same thing with George the poet, he just said it 10 years ago. you know, that's when he started his journey of poetry and being what he is to get to this point. And, you know, they're not finished. Neither of them are finished. And I look forward to seeing what they do next. Go on, sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, I was agreeing with you. If you enjoyed his poem, he has a lot more poems and, as he said, podcast, and a lot of songs. He has some cool songs too that I particularly enjoyed the vibe of.
So search George the Poet on most music platforms and search for Have You Heard George's podcast. Again, that's multiple award-winning podcasts, and it's not going to stop. It's probably going to just keep sweeping up every year. Well deserved. Give people their flowers while you can. So yeah, that's been Love Uncut, people, this week. So I hope you enjoyed. Shout out to those who made it to the end. We see you. Definitely like, share and subscribe if you're feeling the vibe. We'll be back next week at 6 o'clock. Stay safe, everybody, of course.
Thanks
see ya.
for watching. Bye. I'm going to write a poem now.
Yeah. Paris the Poet.